Hello, everyone, and welcome to SCLC TV. I'm your host, Maynard Eaton, and of course, our president and CEO, Dr. Charles Steele Jr. Dr. Steele, your president just left the Walter Reed Hospital, suffering from the COVID-19 epidemic that it's becoming. But he also says right out of office, right out of the hospital, that he's ending the stimulus package negotiations, a retreat on the stimulus package. What impact is that going to have on the least of these that you speak for?
Well, first of all, Mr. Eaton, I don't think that anyone in a leadership capacity, particularly President of the United States of America, could, in their own right and common and decency in terms of mindset, the decency of mindset, could come out and say you're going to use the livelihood and sustainability and the survivableness of the American people upon an election. This should not take place in terms of no arena of politics. You're talking about the people, where the people love this country, but you're telling the people that you don't give a doggone about them. That's very disturbing.
Has it been disturbing to you what's happened with this whole COVID-19? He's dismissed the disease, but now he winds up in the hospital with the disease, now says he's fine. Is this political chicanery, or political trickery, or do you think the man's sick?
It's a misplacing of his bravado, his strongness, his want to be so great and physically fit, mentally, I would assume, thinking that people are not thinking for themselves and they're only looking to him in terms of his politics and his misleading the truism of the facts. Mr. Eaton, Maynard, you cannot tell me that today the sun is not shining when it is. You cannot tell me that we're not having problems with this COVID-19 when folks are dying. People are dying. Over 210 to 15,000 people have died in America alone in terms of COVID-19. And you still, after perhaps 9 to 10 months, not facing reality in terms of the livelihood and you being insensitive to the needs of the people. You are in an elected position, the most powerful position in the world, and you're not dealing with the reality and the realization that we as Americans are in trouble. I go back to my good coach, Doc Rivers, who's saying that for many of years we've loved America, but America is exemplifying with the leadership it has that it doesn't love us, not does it give a doggone. For the lack of a better word.
Continuing on the theme of politics, right down the street from SCLC is Ebenezer Baptist Church, where Dr. King reigned and led the movement from. In the pulpit now is Reverend Raphael Warnock, who was the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church. He is now, to some say, the leading candidate for the U.S. Senate race, a special runoff. Your thoughts about his being the only black person in this race, really seemingly with a chance to become the first black U.S. senator out of Georgia?
Well, let's just make it factual and truthful. There are 21 people in this race, 21 running for this particular race in terms of the U.S. Senate. We have a kinship with Ebenezer Baptist Church, being the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And I think Pastor Warnock is dealing with some serious issues of concern. You know, I just read the article in today's Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And it seemed as though, as you know, I don't endorse candidates, but it seemed as though he has the pulse of the truism of the issues that we as poor people and African Americans should be concerned about, not endorsing any candidate for any particular position is my stance as being president and CEO of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. But the issues we do endorse the issues. And hats off to the issues that I'm following and that I'm concerned about. And Reverend Raphael Warnock is dealing with those issues to put them on the table. I'm really impressed with those issues being talked about.
Well, Dr. Steele, there are others.
Without endorsement.
I got you. We're not asking for your endorsement. We're asking for your insight. I mean, you're a political wizard yourself, or at least you used to be. But there are others in that race, namely the other black candidate, Ed Tarver, who was appointed U.S. District Attorney by Barack Obama, who claims he has much more credibility and experience and credentials, if you have, than Warnock, who has just been a preacher.
Yeah, I've been following that. And I was in Augusta just a few days ago and looking at the various and reading the local newspaper as well. I've been following that particular situation when he asked for the rescinding, I should say, of his candidacy. But that's neither here or there. Politics is about who can get the attention of the people who see the likelihood of your producing for them. And regardless of what anyone say in terms of Pastor Warnock, he's been in the lightning rod position as we have. We're first cousins to Ebenezer, if not brothers and sisters to Ebenezer Baptist Church. And when you're in a position like that, like Pastor Warnock is in, it's like a lightning rod. You know, I don't care what people say that you never have run for office, but you're in a position of influence at Ebenezer Baptist Church, as well as what we are in position at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, 2 blocks away? So what I'm saying is that that's the difference than any other person's view or perception in terms of their understanding the politics of being legislated through position. You know, you don't have to say a word other than someone say, that's the pastor or that's the president of this particular organization. I won't use my being in position with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, but any respectable organization that has a track record. Ebenezer Baptist Church has a track record. And from my understanding, he just celebrated 15 years of being there. And I came to SCLC a year before he got to Ebenezer. 15 years of being there actually stands for something.
They're saying that supporters and those who are backing him religiously, that he may be the new Adam Clayton Powell, Reverend Adam Clayton Powell. And in that article written by Ernie Suggs that you mentioned, Reverend Warnock talks about, we are in a spiritual crisis. Our vote is a kind of prayer for the kind of world we want to live in. That's powerful. That's heavy. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's very powerful. Now, you know, you're talking about the spirituality of doing business or whatever you're doing. You know, you get my attention. You know that, Maynard. But the fact being that you have to exemplify and exert yourself to be a producer. Now, what I'm saying is that it's different in being in a particular position as a pastor or as a religious leader. The religiosity has its place. It has its place. But you have to separate the religion aspect in being a pastor versus being in politics. What am I talking about? Are you or can you subject yourself to the various phenomena that would not be Christian-like in a position such as a U.S. Senator? Not to say that people who are in elected positions at that level are not Christians. But my fact and my point being is that you have to be ready to receive certain innuendos that doesn't go with or go along with your religiosity of being a pastor and being a leader within a religious community. There are so many dynamics that you will be confronted with. And many times you can't put your religion on the table, not on your shoulder, or speak about it. You have to live it and go through the turmoils of politics, which is not easy and it is very difficult.
There's another controversial race going on in your backyard, the race for the 5th District Congressional seat. One of SCLC's sons, if you will, Kwanzaa Hall, is in a runoff for the special election. But the controversy comes from the fact that Nikema Williams, Representative Nikema Williams, some say, was unfairly handed the seat. She will be the Democratic nominee. In fact, Ms. Ruthie Walls from Alabama, Dr. Steele, but lives in the 5th District, says to tell you this vote means everything to her, but having a choice means everything to her as well. It wasn't right that they chose Nikema Williams, she says, the chosen one. It's just not fair. Again, that's Ms. Ruthie Walls asking me to ask you, what do you think about that, Mr. President?
Well, first of all, I jumped on the issue, a week or two ago. I brought it to the attention of people because they called and told me they didn't realize until I broke it down about that particular seat, which the Democratic Party, the State Representative Williams is chairperson or was chairperson at the time, and the Democratic Party of Georgia evidently voted in favor of her being on the ballot. That's number one. Number two, the governor, that's the Democratic Party of Georgia. The governor himself declared a special election. Okay. Right. Now, the Democratic Party of Georgia has a lot of leverage here because of their rules, which is different than the special election that the governor allowed and declare and delegated to be a special election. What is so disturbing about that is that you have candidates, and all due respect, Kwanzaa Hall, along with Mr. Kwanzaa Hall, along with Dr. Franklin, Robert Franklin, former president of Morehouse College, all due respect, the two of them are in a runoff. But my fact being is that whoever win that runoff only can serve, because of the politics, only can serve anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks. And that is undemocratic in terms of bringing it to the people. The people are actually going to vote in the runoff, in the special election, but they will vote. I want you to understand, they will vote in the general election on the ballot of the Democratic Party represented by State Representative Nikema Williams. In fact, she'll be running against another African-American lady who was pardoned by President Trump. She was pardoned by President Trump. And right. Her name is Republican ballot, which is a Democratic district. So what does that mean? It's no way that a Republican, even though you're black and pardoned by the president, it's no way that you can win that election. But there are many people who are saying that we need to have a Democratic vote before, which is the special election, before the general election, which put State Representative Williams in the opposition of the African-American young lady, in all due rights and respect to her, on that ballot, which is a Democratic district, if you understand that.
Yeah, but that also suggests to many the Democrats are no better than Republicans. I mean, this is just inside dirty politics. Well, that's what people tell me. No, but I'm not asking you to respond to that. That's me saying it. But there are others who suggest that either Mr. Hall or Mr. Franklin could beat her by the voters. The voters would prefer one of them. It just seems to me, though, the voters have nothing. The voters have no choice in who's going to represent them. That just doesn't seem fair to me or many people. And my phone's been blowing up about that.
And I understand, and I lean toward your most dynamic analysis there in that the people have been left out of the process. of the Democratic Party in terms of who they are going to vote for in terms of the general election. And I agree with that. Who couldn't agree with that when you take it away from a Democratic district that the people don't have a hand in on who's on the ballot in the general election?
Well, let's change the subject to you. You may not be on the ballot in Alabama, but you're certainly in the front page of the Tuscaloosa magazine. Hey, Big Star, how you doing? What was that story about?
Your check is in the mail. Mr. Eaton, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, my hometown was so nice and polite to put me in that magazine. And then talking about the experience that I had as a young teenager, just being exposed to the civil rights movement, which led to my being involved for 45 years of direct action and promoting the downtroddenness of this society in terms of poor people and people of color. And I'm elated over the fact that somebody recognized that, and by the mere fact that because of Dr. King and the imagery and the example set by Dr. King and others, and Reverend T.Y. Rogers out of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, who's pastor of First African Baptist Church, where I got caught on fire right there looking for my brother who was in that meeting. And my mother said, "Where is that boy? Go get him and bring him home." But in the meantime, I got caught on fire looking for my brother at that mass rally. And when Danny was there and he was all into the movement himself, he was before me, and I have to give him credit that I came along within a matter of a few days looking for him. When I heard those freedom songs, when I heard Reverend T.Y. Rogers speak and preach, I was locked in for the rest of my life. And what the story in the Tuscaloosa magazine is saying, that from a young boy sitting in the pulpit in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, getting caught on fire, led him to be a person of leadership around the world. And they go on and talk about Mikhail Gorbachev of Russia. And I was invited to the 25th commemoration of the fall of the Berlin Wall. Never had no idea that this little boy would be at the table with world leaders, 30 or more. Mikhail Gorbachev, former president of Russia, at one head of the table. I'm at the other head of the table. And they asked the question, "Steele, where do we go from here?" Quite an honor for them to document that story. And I'm elated, I'm humble.
Speaking of honors, two other things very quickly. Our SCLC leader, foot soldier leader, Reverend James Orange, his mural was dedicated this week here in the West End of Atlanta. And that's an honor for him and many of those who've been SCLC stalwarts for years. Is that correct?
That's correct. James Orange is one of the reasons, Reverend James Orange, one of the reasons that I'm here in Atlanta today and have the responsibility of leading the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC. I mean, you're talking about a person who has paid their dues and now he's transitioned to be with our Heavenly Father, but also with the impact it will have on his family. All I can say is just thank you, my brother, in your spirit, because you were the one, along with many others, that inspired me. And I remember when I introduced Reverend James Orange in Selma, and he thought when he asked me to do it, that I would say, man, I got something else to do. He was so elated. He said, because they had the president and CEO of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to introduce me after all these years. He said, I'm motivated and inspired for the rest of my life. That touched me.
Something else touched you this weekend. Your daughter, Charlotte, and your new son-in-law got married. Quite an event, I'm told. I know that touched you. You were in tears, weren't you?
Quite an event. And by you bringing that up from last week into this week, many of people saw this program and they complimented my wife and myself. And we are honored to say that we have two outstanding son-in-laws who will bring about the resolution to the fact that our grandchildren, we now have 4 grandchildren that will be so elated And when we come together, and the last thing my son-in-law said today, when he was going back to New Orleans with his newly bride and our daughter, he said, "Dad, I'll see you Thanksgiving." Man, that made me feel so good. I'll see you on Thanksgiving, which means he'll be back from New Orleans with my daughter and his newly bride to have Thanksgiving dinner with us. What a blessing.
Glad you're happy. What a blessing. A blessing for your wife, too. Listen, we're honored to have you. We'll see you next week. How about that?
Thank you,
Ladies
and thank you for all you do. Thank you.
This has been SCLC TV. Thanks, Rick Clear, our producer. See you next week.